Welcome to the Beyond Ordinary Woman podcast. Every 2 weeks, we'll post a podcast version of one of our free training videos, but you can access them now at beyondordinarywomen.org. This episode or series includes downloadable information on our website, beyondordinarywomen.org. Go to Resources on the main menu and click on podcast/video extras. Enjoy the podcast.
Hi, I'm Kay Daigle of Beyond Ordinary Women Ministries. Welcome to this video podcast. Whichever way you're connecting with us, we want to welcome you. We're so glad that you're here. Today, I'm with Claudia McGuire. Claudia is on our Bow Ministry team, and she and I are going to be talking about teams. The title of this is Growing Teams into Communities. And when I thought about the fact that this would be a really good topic for many of our listeners out there, because some of you lead maybe a committee, some of you lead a ministry, some of you just lead the women's board or whatever it is, whatever that group is, many of us do that at least periodically. And it's a topic that can, I think, be very valuable for you if you lead a group in any way. And I thought of Claudia immediately because I know she's a great person to grow teams. I've heard her talk about how she does it. I know some of the people that she has had on her teams who just are everything that a community would be, I think. So she is ideal for this. So Claudia, thank you for preparing this conversation and joining us today.
Thank you for asking me. My pleasure.
Well, tell us a little bit about your experience building teams. I should have said that Claudia was on staff at Chase Oaks Church for 17 years or so, and she led all sorts of different ministries, different teams. And so just tell us a little bit about that experience, the kinds of teams that you led, and so forth.
I think that was probably one of my most favorite things about being on staff at the church was the whole team structure, building them, inviting people in to be a part of a team, and just investing in them as people as we watch the teams grow. So I worked with teams in women's ministry, definitely, because you need teams for all the different ministries that go under that umbrella. And I worked with first impressions teams, which when I moved to that part of leadership in the church, the first impression team were the people that held the doors open and greeted you in the lobby and told you how to get connected. They were at the welcome booth, and they were running the coffee bar, and they were, helping people find seats in the auditorium and serving communion. So it was this wide variety of responsibilities. And it took a wide variety of people too, introverts, extroverts, those that just love to talk and meet new people, and those that just kind of like working behind the scenes. So those are just a couple of the teams that I was a part of while I was there.
Well, I think that gives everybody a good idea of the fact that you've had a very wide variety of experiences with teams, because, I have seen some of those teams, like your connections team, as you called it at Chase Oaks, that had no connection with each other whatsoever. It was just, they showed up on Sunday morning and did something. There was no community whatsoever. So I'm very interested to see what you have to say about that.
Yeah, and it was one of the teams that I led when we did a large construction project increasing our auditorium at the church. And so we started a little venue. It was kind of an overflow room, but it became a place where people wanted to worship on Sunday mornings. And it was called the patio. It's called the patio. And one of the teams that was just crucial to that working well, I had the privilege of putting together and working with. And that was, I don't even know how many years ago, over 10 years ago. And when I go to church now, they are still serving. And it's just so cool to see that team that when they first started, they were like, I don't think I can do this, to being very confident and capable, and that they're still serving together. It just warms my heart.
That's wonderful. That's a wonderful story. So what would you say is essential to building a team? Do you have certain aspects of building a team that you would say are essential to building them into a community?
Yeah, I think that, whether you're just starting a team or you even have teams that have been together for a while, there's 4 things that will really help you begin a team and grow a team. And I think that if these are considered throughout the life of the team, that people will really be attracted to serving on those teams. And I think that your people will be more intentional about inviting other people to join the team, because you always have to be growing your team, right? So the 4 things, just because I'm kind of a simple person, and when I think of the word team, I just break it down to the letters TEAM. So it's time, effort, affirmation, and mentoring. And those are 4 things that I really lean heavily into, just because that's the way I love to lead teams. But I also look at how other people in the Bible led teams. I mean, Jesus had a team. He had a plan. He had a purpose. And I think we can learn a lot from that model. Paul had ministry teams that he worked with. We see Nehemiah and building a wall. He had teams. There has to be structure, and there has to be this presence of teams to make, whether it's your business, your place of work, your school, or churches, work well and thrive. So those are the 4 things: time, effort, affirmation, and mentoring. I also think that when you incorporate these things into your team, you do begin to see the team more as a community and not a committee. I read about that. I don't even know where I read it, but I was reading about that one time, and I thought, boy, that just makes a lot of sense, because we're so used to, or a lot of places still call teams committees, and I'm so team oriented. I'm like, wait, turn your committees into communities. They're really a small group. They're really a community. And I think that these small groups, these teams, really present opportunities for people to grow and learn and thrive and be able to give themselves to something bigger and better than what they could ever do, right, as an individual. Yeah. And that's one of the things I think one of the traps we fall into is we think we can do something better or faster or more efficient by ourselves sometimes, because we know what's needed, and we neglect to invite people to come and serve alongside us. And I think we need to just work a little better at that. I also think that as you're building a team, you're building a reputation for yourself, and you're building a reputation for your entire team, which affects the agenda and the outcomes of what you really want to do. If I'm leading a team, I want my team to be known really as an effective team, as a team that gets things done, and that has a team vibe or community aspect that really cares for one another. I don't know anyone that starts a team that really wants them to fail. And we want our teams to succeed, right? And that's part of building that reputation. So we want to just make sure we're working with them to accomplish those goals that we've set.
Absolutely. And if your team feels like they're sharing in the goal, they're sharing in the purpose, and certainly in the church, your purpose is bigger than any aim or goal that you can have, because it is God's kingdom work that you're about. And so certainly you want it to be well done. You want that reputation to be there. You want to be effective, because it's such important work.
Yes. And that has nothing to do with pride but again, you don't want to be a failure as a team. There's stuff to do. There's people whose lives are being impacted, and like you said, it's kingdom work. That's a good thing.
Absolutely. And doing things together, you learn from one another, and you're able to think as a group and have more than one perspective. And that's
Mhm.
so helpful.
Right, right. So if you if you start with the T in team, time, just to talk about that a little bit, that's part of the problem with some people is building a team takes time. Whether you're building it from the ground up or it's existing and you're growing it, you're building it in that aspect. There's no way around it. If you really want your people to succeed, if you really want to achieve these outcomes, then it's mainly going to be your time that's taken to get started. There's just no way around that. So everything from praying for your team, God, who do you want on this team? What are some of the goals that we need to accomplish? How can I best find the people that are most suited for this particular team? That takes time. Planning the meetings, which you do have to have some meetings.
You do. In
Takes
fact,
time.
Claudia and I did some videos on the very thing. And if you feel like your meetings are purposeless or they're off track or they're just not accomplishing much, you need to find those videos because they're excellent. There are 3 short videos talking about meetings. So hate to interrupt you, but
No. But you're right. Hosting those meetings and planning those is important and it takes time. It can't be just, oh, well, I'll sit down together and talk about problems, because a lot of times that's what ends up happening and nothing gets accomplished. So also not just those kind of things, but checking with your team to see how they're doing. What's going on in your life? What's some progress that you're making right now? What are some needs that you have? What questions do you have? Those all take time. And some of my frustrations that I have felt over the years in working with a leader of a team was somebody would kind of come in and drop the bomb. This is what we're supposed to do. So let's get it done, and then they disappear. And you kind of feel like you're out there floating. You're not sure, is this what they had in mind? Or are these the people we need to check with on this? How do we get that going? That's just a terrible feeling to be envisioned with something and then there's no one around. You just feel like you're on your own. The other thing about being a leader of a team that is pretty ineffective is when you just show up when there's needs or when there's problems or when there's a crisis, that doesn't help people. That really doesn't build community. And if you get the mentality that the team is the agenda, the team is really the agenda, because without them, nothing's going to be accomplished.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah. So that's just time. There's just no way around it. I had to put that in there. So.
Well, and you're exactly right. And I know many people who just tend to do it themselves because they do think that's faster. And in some ways it is. But you're not growing a community. You're not allowing people to participate in God's work. You're just doing it yourself. You're not sharing that privilege of serving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's if that's important to you, that biblically, that's how we incorporate people's gifts. That's the body of Christ working together. We don't want to eliminate people and not allow them to be a part of our teams, because that is we need to incorporate their giftings into teams, and I just think that's important, really important.
It is.
Yeah. The E, I'll just go into that. The E part of team is effort. Not only is it going to take time, it's going to take effort, and that, I think that begins with the effort that you put as that team leader into clearly defining what you're inviting these people to be a part of. I think we talked about this in another video, that when you approach somebody about being a part of your team, I think one of the worst things you can say is, there's not a lot involved. You just have to show up twice a month. Well, boring. Like, if it doesn't matter, why are you asking me? Because I like to do things that matter,
Yeah, absolutely.
And so don't downplay the role that you're inviting them to. Actually, you should upplay the role that you're inviting them to, and again,
and the other
yeah.
thing, you don't want to downplay it, because you don't want them to be surprised when they actually have to do something.
True.
I can't tell you how many people have complained to me because something was pictured by the person recruiting them as simple and easy and didn't take much. And then when they got into it, it required a whole lot more effort than that. And they began to get bitter over the whole thing. And that's certainly not community building in any way. And it doesn't give people a good sense of wanting to be part of any team after that.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree with you. So I think that you just don't want to do that disservice right off the bat. You want to be clear. You want to clarify the role. And that too, I think, requires on your part and whoever you're inviting to the team, just, again, prayer and preparation. I think a way to let people know what's involved, and this requires some effort too, is to literally have a job description. I think that's important.
Totally agree.
Oh yeah. And I think that also these people need to know, like, what's involved with this. Who is this ministry or who is this team going to affect? Whose responsibility is it? What is my responsibility in it? Who has the authority over it or decision-making authority, and how does this fit into the overall church vision? And
Right.
Those are important things. And I think that's empowering too. When you give them a job description, that shows them, oh, she's thought about this role and what it involves. And then when you found that person to fill whatever role you're looking for, sit down with them and go through it. And if they have some edits or questions or additions, or they're like, I don't understand why that's part of this role, can we talk about that? Then you can rewrite it according to their understanding of it. So I think that's important when it comes to effort.
I have some job descriptions that I wrote for some of the women's ministry areas that I will attach as a resource for this, because these are just guidelines. I'm not suggesting you use them as they are, but just as you said, you need to write it as to what would fit for your particular team position.
Yes.
And it would just give you an idea of the kind of ways to write it, the way to set it out, and the kind of things to think about. And so I've used those before with other people and they've really appreciated it. So
Good.
We will make those available online.
That's very good. That's a good resource. The other aspect that I think of in team is the A is for affirmation. And I think affirmation is really important too. Again, you can look at Jesus. He affirmed his disciples, his team, and you can look at Paul's life. He affirmed his people, his ministry team. I think it's, when you read through the New Testament, there's just lots of stories about how Paul worked, who he worked with, how he trained them, how he affirmed them. And he was really bold and honest in that. He wasn't afraid to tell them he loved them. He wasn't afraid to talk about their problems or their shortcomings or ways that they might be able to help themselves or get better, I should say, especially when you think about Timothy. The other thing about affirmation is people usually, and just think about this for a minute, people usually feel something or want to feel something before they act on something. And so when you think about that, like even as far as like if you're giving to some organization, you want to feel something towards that organization. That's a reason why you give, because you feel something usually. And it's the same way with working in a ministry or on a team or with the person. They might start out by feeling like, oh, I really like you, I want to work with you. But there needs to be, a feeling towards the ministry itself, what you're doing together. And I think it's important when you talk about affirmation to just figure out how does the team feel, how are they feeling? And again, to, like Paul, know that you let them know that you care about them, you care about what they're doing, you care about how they are, and you love them. Don't withhold those things. Words are empowering. words are life-giving. And whether that's through your emails or your text messages or cards or whatever it is, people, they might not admit it, but they need to be recognized and or celebrated for the things they're doing, or for their great ideas, or for how you've seen them care for others on the team. Those are great things, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's really important.
Yeah. So that affirmation just shows the team, hey, I'm committed to you. I'm here for you. I love you. And I also believe that as you tell others on staff or wherever about the team and the great things you see in them and how they're acting as a body of believers who love and care for one another and are on task, on point for a mission, again, that's building a reputation for your team. You know, you want to brag on them. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because again, it eventually it has an effect on the church, on the ministry, on the team, on other people that are looking at what you're doing and seeing that you're making a difference. And I'd like to be a part of something that's making a difference, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Totally agree with that. Affirmation is really important. I read an article years ago about volunteers, and they described it as paying. You need to pay your volunteers, and they weren't talking about money.
Mm-hmm.
You're paying them with, you know, letting them know they're doing a good job, or you're paying them with, and certainly sometimes that can include small little gifts for people as well, you know.
Absolutely.
But definitely recognition, definitely affirmation. So that's great. Well, what about mentoring?
Yeah, I also think that's, again, you have an opportunity here in building a team to model good team building to the team. So whether it's more of a passive mentoring, if that's even possible, that people are just going to pick up on, they see how you do something and then maybe they try that with their own group, you know, that's mentoring. But again, going back to how you treat other people, how you spend time with them, how you care about them, that's most important. If you remember, the team is the agenda. And if within your team you find those that are very reliable, they're really passionate about what they do, they take initiative, you know, they're committed to what's going on, you know, that they kind of rise up, you know, those people. And I think it's fair to pour more into them. They have more of an interest, and they will be more interested, I think, in learning, in spending more time with you, whether it's, you know, you sitting down over coffee every couple of weeks, twice a month, or whether it's a resource you want to give them, a book about some area of interest, a podcast, a website, something that would help, again, empower them, teach them, help them get better at what they're doing. So I think all those things are crucial to leading a good team. And where there's community, I mean, this is a community that is existed or is made up of relationships, right? That's what we're talking about. It's communities made up of relationships. And this is where things are being built. This is where things are getting accomplished. And with your team also, instead of just always having it be about the team, you can ask them really good coaching questions, you know, like, what can we do better? What are your personal goals right now? Where do you see the team being in 3 months? How can I pray for you? Again, going back to your feelings, because sometimes those feelings lead to action. So how are you feeling right now about that new thing we just did? How did that affect you? Did it go down well? Did you have some problems with it? Because teams they're living, right, organisms, like a church. They're always changing. There's always going to be a new thing that kind of comes in, or a new person that changes the dynamic or the purpose of the team. And so I think by just having a mentality as a team leader that I am modeling what good team looks like, what good, healthy community looks like, that by having that attitude of mentoring, that you can really help people take their next steps in their personal lives, on the team. Maybe that's your new team leader. When you find someone one that does take initiative, that's more involved, and I think that just adds to the whole community life of the group. So if that makes sense, I think it's part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right about there will always be some that rise to the top, that want more responsibility, that are able to handle it, that have the time for it, who are more excited. And we need to be aware of them. As I learned years ago, as a leader, part of your job is to replace yourself. Who could take my place? Who could do this part of my job if I turned it over to them? Who are the people that can rise up without me someday because they've been trained so well to do this?
Right. I absolutely agree. It doesn't stop. In fact, you can just keep that circle going, because mentoring, again, it takes time. You're not going to get to know your people if you're not spending any time with them. You're just going to see them as people that are accomplishing a goal for you. And that's just the wrong way to think about your teams.
It is, because that's sort of a using people
Feels
rather
that way.
than developing people, rather than building into people and loving people. So I think those are good things to remember. Well, thank you so much, Claudia. I think this will be real helpful to lots of people out there who lead in one way or the other. And certainly these principles extend beyond the church to anybody who's leading other groups and other situations as well. But the great thing about a church team is that we have a really great God and a really great goal. And it should not be a chore to grow a team. It should be a joy to grow a community of people together to do something together.
Absolutely.
So thanks so much.
You're welcome.
We are so glad you joined us for this episode of our podcast or this video. You can find these resources and many others on our website, beyondordinarywomen.org. There you can find our contact information if you have questions or we can help you in any way. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks for listening to the Beyond Ordinary Women podcast. You can find more podcast episodes and resources for women in leadership by going to beyondordinarywomen.org. This podcast is produced by Beyond Ordinary Women Ministry. Our production team includes Evelyn Babcock, Kay Daigle, Deborah Herring, and Sharifa Stevens. Theme music, Back in Stride by Don Miller, used courtesy of Christine Miller.